Hey, what's up, herd watchers? I am going to do a sort of a quick herd watching video. I'm out here in the park in the morning. If there's too much road noise or whatever, I apologize. We'll just have to deal with it. But basically what I wanted to talk to you guys about, the last video I did was sort of right in the wake of Charlottesville. And we can talk in the future. We're going to have to circle back about sort of the aftermath of that. We're going to have to talk about the violence in the wake of the Trump Phoenix rally last night. And what I really want to talk to you about now, though, is basically, how do we put this? We have to talk about censorship. Now, let's be clear in our terminology. Censorship is a thing you do, right? You censor opinions that you don't want other people to see so that they don't get exposure. That's censorship. Now, government censorship, which is the thing that's protected by the Constitution, that's when government does that. And the reason why that's in the Constitution is because the government has the power to use force. So the government is uniquely positioned to censor things in a way that we as private citizens would have a hard time combating, which means the government is limited in a way that private citizens are not, specifically because the government is basically outside of competition, right? There's no way for an opposing force to really arise that can ultimately prevail against government when government has the guns and the military. Now, the Second Amendment attempts to work with that as well, but we obviously don't want it to come to that. So one of the reasons we limit government censorship is because the government, there's no way around government censorship. You would have to go underground and they would hunt you down, and ultimately you would be shot and killed if need be. So we need to separate the act of censorship. You can censor things, I can censor things. We do it all the time. Parents do it. They censor what their children see. Companies censor what goes in the company newsletter. Google has censored the opinions of its employees, for instance. So if someone tries to tell you that can't be censorship, it's a private company, that's bullshit. Of course it can be censorship. It's not constitutionally protected. In other words, it's not censorship that violates the Constitution, but it's still censorship, and it still is subject to the same analysis and can sort of the same analysis and criticism that censorship always needs to be subject to. So now let's talk about Google, and by extension YouTube, and now Facebook and Twitter and GoDaddy DNS, which I'm very, very disappointed in. These are private organizations who have decided to censor the content that's on their platforms. Now, again, they have every right in the world to do so. I don't have a problem with it. I'm not expecting this to be solved legally by the government, nor, in fact, would I want to. Nor, despite what other people might say, is net neutrality the answer to this particular thing. It wouldn't have been an issue. The answer to this is the marketplace. But that doesn't mean we can't discuss what these people are doing and why. So now I think it's pretty reasonable for Google and Facebook and these places to shut down those people who are using their platform to initiate a specific and clear call to violence. I think we can all agree that there's no responsibility for a private entity to take chances with that. Where I come out with the problem is that when you realize that these companies are not neutral, not that they have to be. My company certainly isn't neutral. Google isn't neutral. But they have a specific ideology. And what that means is that in Google's mind, those people who are dressing up in face masks and taking baseball bats and going out by the hundreds and attacking Trump supporters at rallies, those people calling themselves Antifa, those people who call themselves Black Lives Matter, Google doesn't consider that to be a call to violence. Google buys into the rhetoric that those demonstrations are peaceful, counter demonstrations, and that the violence just sort of happens. It's just sort of magical. So because Google buys into that, Google does not consider those pages to be violent. On the meanwhile, Google will consider a page that has a a critical discussion of the role of extremist Islamic supporters in terrorist attacks, even though that page never makes a call for violence the way a Black Lives Matter page does. Google will consider that to be hate speech and go ahead and shut it down. So we need to, when I say we should be very cautious about Google and their growing willingness to shut down points of view, my challenge to them is not a legal one. My challenge to them is not one in the sense where I don't think they should do what they want with the platform that they built. My challenge is that what they're doing there reveals their ethics, reveals their morals, reveals their point of view, and reveals to us what they think of us as a society. And we need to act accordingly about whether or not we consider Google an ally anymore. Google and Facebook and YouTube. And in particular, when they decide to use blacklisting services, third-party blacklisting services, which is basically what Google has decided to do now. So Google and some of these other places, you know, if you go back over the years, I have been talking to you about this place called the Southern Poverty Law Center, who over the last 10 years or so has slowly sort of built this bogus reputation that they're impartial. I mean, oh my God, it's Southern poverty. You know, how could they be wrong? They're just people trying to work for the poor. And for a while, that group was credible. They listed real hate crimes by obvious hate groups, and you could, for a while, it made sense to go, if the Southern Poverty Law Center says somebody's bad, maybe they're bad. But over time, the SPLC became very aware of the power they had. And once they gained a little bit of power as somebody maintaining lists, so if you were someone who wanted to block hate speech and you didn't have the time or energy or staff or expertise to figure out who was a hater, what you would do is you would go to the Southern Poverty Law Center list because it felt objective and it felt like they knew what they were doing. And you would go there and you would take their list and you would pretend that they were an authority on this topic and you would just take their word for it. And that might have held some semblance of making sense at one time or another. But then, when they started getting famous for that, what do you think happened? What always happened? Well, because that list was not really managed in an objective way, because they weren't really thinking of themselves, I'm going to be very charitable here and say that they may have been unwitting in this at the beginning. But because they weren't expecting people to really game the system, what happened was people gamed the system. So there were calls that went out through the left, through the SJW left, to find ways to put more and more of their political enemies on the SPLC list. And then what would happen is always the same thing. You know, you would say something that somebody objected to. They would get a bunch of their friends together. They would all petition the SPLC. They would send them quotes in the most biased possible terms, and eventually they would get you on that list, you in the generic. And then that list would then they would send an announcement that you had been added to the SPLC hate group list to then 1,000,000,001 other people who would amplify that thing. And now that blog post or that position you took that you were condemning Islamist extremist terrorists, you were now a hate group. Or let's say you thought that, as happened a couple of summers ago, maybe you had an opinion that, I don't know, maybe some of those police shootings were justified, or maybe you should wait for input, or maybe you just didn't like rioting. Well, a lot of groups wound up on the SPLC list a couple of summers ago because of that. And then the SPLC, sort of as it gained that group, if it was ever neutral, it's long gone. Now it's a far leftist organization. And what we're left with is a left-wing organization who has managed to build a PR campaign that they're an impartial judge of who is and isn't a hate group. And that gives cover to YouTube and Google and Twitter for them to say, oh, we're not censoring anybody. We're only taking hate groups. Well, who decides it's a hate group? Oh, well, we're using the list from the objective Southern Poverty Law Center. And when that list is not objective and the people who make that list hold a political ideology that matches with the one of Google, then you have sort of a perfect circle of justification. Google is obviously free to do whatever they want to do with their platform. They want to censor particular political viewpoints, but they want to hide the fact that they're censoring viewpoints. They want to pretend they're simply censoring hate speech. So they go and get the SPLC to give them cover, and then the SPLC gains credibility because other companies are going to say, well, the SPLC is good enough for Google, it's obviously good enough for us. And that's why you now have a situation where a very small organization that's has a very far left idea of what hate speech is and what is and isn't acceptable is now the arbiter to a very real degree of what can appear on YouTube, what can appear on Google, what you can take PayPal money for, what you can do a lot of things with. Now, I'm going to get some Yahoo in the comments or in email or in whatever, and I get a lot of this. Some asshole is going to go, oh, you're just upset because the Daily Stormer got deplatformed and whatever. And you know what? That's bullshit. I could not care less whether the white supremacist Daily Stormer assholes can get their message out to anybody in the world. I don't agree with the message. Just whatever. Shut up. No. I am, as a First Amendment absolutist, a little concerned because there is a slippery slope, and we've seen it. We've seen it happen over the course of weeks. It's, I'm on board if GoDaddy thinks that the Daily Stormer's a bad choice, and I'm on board if Google thinks that they're over the line. I think they're over the line. But it didn't stop there, did it? Google and YouTube and these people, they're taking on someone named Sargon of Akkad, A-K-K-A-A-D, I believe, who is by no means a white supremacist. He's just a guy who talks from a conservative point of view. It's only a matter of time before, more platforms than Twitter try and shut down Milo Yiannopoulos. I expect Facebook to attempt to shut him down soon. I expect Facebook to try and take down the herd watching and the riding herd pages fairly soon. I expect, PayPal, if I ever had a PayPal donate button up on herd watching, I would be not shocked if they didn't take them down. And, any thoughts I might have had of herd watching eventually growing to a place where I could be on Patreon, that's done. Patreon's also signaled that they have no interest in libertarian views or right side views or conservative views, that these platforms, they literally do consider any opinion that doesn't match theirs to be hate speech. And as they grow in their deplatforming, it's up to the market to bring up the counter. The counter to Google losing its mind and becoming a full-on left-wing political organization is not government, it's us. You have to start backing your content distribution to other channels. Anyway, that's that rant for other providers for what you need to do. But now, let's expand that out a little bit further, and let's talk about sort of like when you look at the wider discourse, you see that these companies, they're just symptoms of the wider sort of left-wing concept that we've been seeing, that any opinion that disagrees with you is violent. And again, this is not to deny the fact that there isn't some actual violence, though, as I've said in video after video, the vast majority of it is from the left. But this is why. Let's say I think that it's okay for a cake baker to not bake a cake for a wedding he disagrees with, whether that wedding is maybe you're an atheist cake baker and you don't want to make a Christian wedding cake, maybe you're a Muslim shop and you don't want to cook food for a Christian wedding, maybe whatever. I don't care. It's your company, and just like I defend the right of Google to do it, I defend the right of you to do it. You don't want to do it, whatever. But now, what these people have decided is that I just don't hold a different opinion of them, that obviously my disapproval of a homosexual marriage recognized by the government if I disapprove of that, that is actually an act of violence. And that's where the mental derailing goes. It's not just an act of political difference. It's not just something they want to judge me for and decide I'm a bad person and they don't want to deal with me, which is absolutely their right. They may decide my ethics and theirs are incompatible. No, it's when they decide that it's actually an act of violence, when they equate an opinion they dislike with physical assault. That's when things get dangerous. Because if you've decided that my speech or my feelings about your lifestyle are the equivalent of an assault, then you mentally start making the association that assaulting me in response is a justified thing. If you think that me saying that I disapprove of your lifestyle is the same thing as me beating you up or raping you or assaulting you, then of course you're going to feel free to grab a stick, get together in groups of thousands, and beat me until I stop talking. Because to you, I wasn't just talking. I was attacking you. I was actually literally attacking you physically. And that's when things get dangerous, because that's when people lose their minds. When that line between speech and action gets blurred, that's when you see attacks on the First Amendment. That's when you see censorship go absolutely through the roof. And that's when people lose that thin thread of civility, because that's what happens when a conservative speaker comes to your college campus and you don't like it, and you're sitting in your dorm room literally shaking because you don't know how to handle the fact that this assault is about to happen. And it's the same thing like I'm going to get raped and he's going to be here on Friday and he's going to talk, and oh my God, it's the end of the world. I have to do something. I have to pull a fire alarm. I have to get a stick and go beat him up. I have to riot. I have to, what's next? I have to build a bomb? I have to shoot him? Well, that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing from the left. I'm not talking about the asshole, idiot, crazy guy who drove his car into a group of people. I'm not talking about the obviously insane. That's everywhere. Those people will always find some excuse to do what they're doing. No, I'm talking about the thousands of people on the left who feel that the right answer is to hide their faces, grab sticks, and go and descend upon the people coming out of a Trump rally. I'm talking about the idiots last night who decided that the only possible response to Donald Trump giving a speech they didn't like was to try and burn down the center of a major US city, because that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to cause damage. They were trying to attack and intimidate their political opponents. And this is the hallmark of fascism. You know, fascism almost never calls itself fascism. You know, and would the KKK and the guys from the Daily Stormer, would those people be a real problem if they gained power? Of course they would. And I would be out there fighting them too if they were gaining power. I'll fight anybody who tries to shut down the concept of freedom and liberty in the country. But it turns out they're not the problem. It's just they don't have the power to be a massive problem. When you're talking about fascism, let's talk about the fact that you can't give a political speech if you have the wrong opinion in America, because you have to be worried about an armed mob of thousands coming and attempting to beat you, the people that come to listen to you, with sticks. That you cannot hold the wrong political opinion in America without fearing that somebody is going to attempt to burn down the venue you're in, or that you have to hire extra people to sweep for bombs because you have a controversial opinion that you might express on campus, or that if you work in the tech industry and you hold the wrong opinion. And I'm not talking about people who are actual white supremacist assholes, or the people who are actual whatever. I'm talking about just some guy at Google who said, hey, here's some well-sourced scientific data that indicates that just maybe there's a difference between men and women that affects the way they interact with the tech sector, and that we should be aware of that, and let's talk about that. If you're a guy who says the wrong thing, you are blacklisted. You are under the constant threat of violence by the mainstream left, and that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the fact that we have a couple of thousand white supremacist idiots in the world. who I would just as soon evaporated from the face of the earth. But they're not getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from the GOP. They're not getting put on, puff pieces written about them on CNN about how important it is for the youth to join them. We're talking about some people who would have no platform in the world if CNN didn't keep trotting them out and giving them a platform so that they can run a chyron at the bottom that says white supremacy on the rise. I'm talking about the fact that we have a major political party in the United States that's funding a terrorist organization, as they've done before. Let's not forget, this isn't the first time that the DNC has decided that the right answer to a political conflict was to form a group of paramilitaries to hide their faces and go beat the hell out of anybody who said things they didn't like, or voted in a way they didn't agree with. That's how the KKK started. That was the Democrats. That was the Democrats upset that minorities were voting and they were trying to find a way to shut down votes they didn't like. The tactics were exactly the same tactics that Antifa is using now. So you want to talk about fascism? Fascism is censorship backed by violence. The equation of the wrong viewpoint with violence as a justification for violence. That's fascism. So yeah, are there some white supremacist, fascist assholes running around the world? You betcha. But they're not the people who burn down cities. They're not the people showing up in tens of thousands with sticks. They're not the people getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from a major U.S. political organization. They're not the people getting protected by Google. They're not the people getting protected by Facebook. And if Zuckerberg decides to run for presidency, you thought, all that shit people said about, Donald Trump's running for the presidency, with his money, he's going to control the thing. Imagine what Facebook will do to the dissenting opinion of anyone who doesn't think Mark Zuckerberg should be president. Imagine what Google would do to any group that dared oppose Mark Zuckerberg's presidential run. Or if some Yahoo from Google decides he wants to run for the presidency. You think Google won't start shaping search engine results? Of course they will. They already are. They already do. So we're facing an interesting time around censorship and whether this nation actually believes in free speech or not, and whether people are going to be fooled by a bunch of fascists coming at you with their face hidden and a stick in their hand, telling you to shut up, telling you that they'll beat the shit out of you if you step out of line. If you're going to let those people get away with that because they call themselves, their hashtag is anti-fascist. Fascism is defined not by what it calls itself, by what it does. And are there small fascist organizations on the right that we need to keep our eyes out for? You bet. And I'm no fan of them, and you should protest them. But none of that, the presence of 2,000 scattered, powerless KKK members across the country that nobody paid any attention to until CNN needed some airtime and a way to attack Donald Trump, that's not nearly the same threat that an organization that now has hundreds of thousands of members and receives millions and tens of millions of dollars and riots and is responsible for the ambush and murder, premeditated murder of police officers, that is responsible for assassins who showed up and attempted to kill, now have attempted to kill judges, now have attempted to kill GOP lawmakers, now have attempted to kill. I mean, we have re-entered a point where groups that are funded by the DNC are actually attempting political assassinations. You cannot equate that with a small group of idiots marching somewhere in the middle of whatever down Main Street in their stupid white outfits, the way they've been doing all along. Now, should those people be protested? Yes. Should you get 100,000 people to line the streets and chant and shout them down and let everybody know that as Americans we have no interest in their ideology? Yes. Should you make them feel embarrassed and stupid to be out there? Yes. Do I hope that that response would drive them into their homes and get them to shut up? Yes, of course. Of course I want that. Do I think that that ideology is in its way dangerous if it starts gaining some strength? Yeah, of course I do. I don't want it to happen. I don't want it to gain any strength at all. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate how scary and horrible it is for those people that are the targets of those groups to have to deal with the fact that out there's some asshole in his living room putting together his newsletter talking about how you're an animal and you shouldn't be in the country or you shouldn't be on the planet. I get it. And if that group ever gains enough power or becomes violent, I'm with you. I'm right there. But the fact that I understand that doesn't mean that I'm not keeping my eye on the group that actually is marching down the streets in thousands. The fact that if you try and hold the Trump rally, you have to accept the fact that this group is going to descend upon the people as you come out. The fact that you have to hire extra police so the people that want to go to a Trump rally can get to their cars without being assaulted. The fact that those police officers are going to be hit with urine and feces and bottles filled with concrete and maybe bombs. That old women are going to be tased, and that someone who committed the hard crime of standing on a street with an American fucking flag is going to be descended upon by a bunch of college assholes who were bored and looking for something to make them feel super special, decided they were going to rip up an American flag so that they had something to put up on YouTube. A YouTube video that, by the way, will stay up. Whereas the YouTube video of the conservative group that the woman was part of, talking about how those thugs ripped that flag down, will get flagged and taken down time after time after time. No. I can be upset about two groups of fascists. I can be upset about more than one group of assholes. And understanding that one of these groups is right now a significantly larger dangerous to liberty does not mean that I support the other one. It is not supporting the points of view I find abhorrent to speak out against violence. It's not supporting one group of fascists to speak out against another. And if you can't see that, then I'm sorry for you. And I apologize that you're that upset. If you're somebody I care about, I'm sorry if it makes you feel scared. But we got to be able to talk about it. You have to be able to talk about groups of people running around in their thousands in city centers, rioting, taking over college campuses, and beating the crap out of anyone they don't like. And we saw this throughout the thing. We have to be able to talk about the fact that the DNC, one of the two major political parties, is actually paying for, supporting, and providing both logistical, financial, and political support to groups that have assassinated police officers. And if you think that any of that means I'm supporting the Klan or Nazis, I don't know where your head is at. If I'm being charitable, hopefully you're just upset and scared and confused, and that you're not actually that you're not actually blind. Anyway, I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from. I appreciate the time. This video's run a little bit long, but we haven't spoken in a while. Obviously, I'm passionate about this, and you know what? You take it for what it's worth. All right, take it easy, guys. This has been Herd Watching. Go check out Riding Herd, RIDINGHERD. As always, have a backup. Come to herdwatching.com in case, I can't believe you have to put this at the end of a video now, but just in case Twitter decides to kill me, just in case Facebook decides to kill the platform, just in case whatever, the website will eventually come back online at some point. And feel free to hit me up on Gab, which is a Twitter alternative. and you can find me there as Herdwatching, HERDWATCHINZ. At the moment, it looks like Gab is probably less prone to deplatforming people they disagree with. So just in case you can't find me, that's where I'll be. All right, take it easy, guys. Bye.